Hey, it's Tuesday. I'm Dominic D'Angelo. It's Rumor and Innuendo. I'm of adfreeshows.com, SEscoops.com, and OneTrueSportTV.com. And per usual, I am with Robert Karplus, WWE Creative_ish. Robert, welcome to Tuesday. We got some good stuff to talk about today.
We've got a lot of stuff to talk about here today. We're going to be talking last night's show, but we're not going to delve into any of the spoilers for next week's show, but you certainly felt that reverberating throughout the broadcast. We'll say hi to some of the folks who are joining us here. Willie Thornbrew asks, is Chad Gable in the Brooklyn Brawler spot now? No. Odd question, but there we go. Johnny Disco says, good morning, R&I. I was a little confused when they announced Damage Control was facing TFC at the start of Raw. I legit forgot about the Pasta Fusion collection and thought it was a group from NXT. Kind of had the same thought. I'm not going to lie. Dre Owens, happy R&I Tuesday. Loaded card for NXT tonight. I know nothing of that.
No, nor do I. I need to keep some tabs on that for sure.
And Jeff Henninger asking the one question everybody has after last night's Raw. I have no clue who's going to be the fifth man for either team. We've got some suspicions, but I think that'll be revealed in the days and weeks to come.
Yes, keep some intrigue going for sure. And Raw was pretty intriguing despite it being a double taping and despite them kind of balancing things out, so to speak. Let's get to it, though, Robert. Damian Priest faces off with Gunther to kick off the show. And I really like this promo by Damian Priest. I thought it really hammered home the fact that Gunther is unsure of himself. You had the tension with Ludwig Kaiser, and I think Priest is really honing himself as a single star right here. But what did you think?
I think there was a natural cadence to some of what he was saying when he was talking about the initial idea of feeling unsure about myself against you, and I hate that was the case. But the promo overall was just sort of there. It was a lot of paint by numbers. It was, hey, I know what you're already going to say, and you know what I'm going to say, and we're going to have a match in Survivor Series. I don't think it added a ton. We already knew there was tension between Ludwig Kaiser and Gunther. Sure. We know this is the second bite at the apple with this Priest situation. I don't think there was anything necessarily to this that made me jump out and say, man, I'm now more excited to see this than I was before.
I don't know. I felt different. I thought the way Damian Priest delivered the promo, and then in turn, you got that added element of Gunther being unsure of himself and the tension with Ludwig Kaiser. You know, obviously you're not expecting a title change or anything to that effect, but I felt it's building up for a good story, and the crowd was kind of into it too. So I was for it, Robert. I liked it. Next up, we had Damage Control defeating the aforementioned Pasta Fusion collection. Io Sky in the mix there, really a highlight for her. I'm just not about these factions, I guess. I know they got to make do with kind of like, hey, let's try to make the most of our women's division and things like that. But I don't think this is very effective for anybody. And Dakota Kai returned, obviously, too. So I don't know. I think people are just getting lost in the shuffle here, Robert. What do you think?
You know, she returned with a story that Pure Fusion Collective, or at least Shayna Baszler, was who took her out, which neither you nor I was actually going to remember. So good on them for that sort of Tony Khan-like memory grab. But crowd was flat for it. Pure Fusion Collective has not been on TV the last several weeks, and when they have been on, they've been less than effective. I think a strong women's stable can work. I think Damage Control, for the most part, has worked. But this here just felt, again, a little paint by numbers. We need to get Io Sky a win. We need to further her as the number one contender. We have Dakota Kai back. We may as well use her. And Pure Fusion Collective are available. And when you're doing a double taping, when you're doing a 4-hour show, you're really limited in terms of who you can let wrestle and how many times the audience is really going to be able to see them. So you can utilize the Pure Fusion Collective group we don't typically see because their chances are not going to be on Raw next week.
Quick aside, do you know why they did a double taping exactly?
I actually don't know. I was trying to look that up. I don't know. They're not on it's next week's not Thanksgiving week. Yeah. So it's not like they're giving them that time off. I don't know what the issue was for it. And quite frankly, did not take the time to look it up.
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure about it either. So backstage, we had another team on the verge of a breakup, which is the New Day. Tension between Kofi Kingston sticking up for himself against Xavier Woods. And then he agreed to face Pete Dunne. for our truth's behalf. And hey, plus Xavier Woods was wearing a Baron Corbin T-shirt. Robert, this is quite kind of another aside here too. Could this whole thing be like an inside thing with Baron Corbin coming back to WWE and just, hey, let's lean into the blurring of the lines a little bit here by WWE? They did it with Kevin Owens and the social media stuff. Could this be another thing that they're maybe doing with Baron Corbin, or is that just a hat tip to Baron Corbin?
That was a hat tip. They're not bringing Baron. That doesn't add anything when you find out a guy is leaving or released or whatever that may be, and they do the actual announcement. It's not like there was this sudden groundswell of people saying, "My God, we are Corbinites, and we desperately need Baron Corbin back on programming." That is absolutely not the case of the situation here. It did take away from that segment a little bit for me. I'm not going to lie. I even tweeted about it because the idea is Xavier Woods is, I'm focused on my business. I'm not worried about anybody else. Stop worrying about R-Truth. Stop worrying about Pete Dunne. Stop worrying about helping Rey Mysterio, which was happening in the past. Like, it's you and I going for the tag titles. That story makes sense. The shirt did take me out of that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. You try to further a story, and hey, you're talking about something that happened off air and everything like that. So, going up. Speaking of which, Pete Dunne defeated Kofi Kingston, courtesy of a little confrontation Kofi had with Xavier Woods, and just the tension continuing to build. And I'm liking the elements of this, as again, still a favorite aspect of pro wrestling overall for me is this New Day storyline going on. So I think this is continuing that, and I think they did a pretty good job at this too, Robert. It's kind of part of the course though too.
Well, overall, it's compelling because what makes a heel or a potential hero or a villain in literature across the board compelling is when they believe in what it is that they're saying. And you look at what's happened with Xavier Woods. All he cares about is being tag champion. All he cares about is him and Kofi finding success. So when you have distractions like Kofi bringing in a guy like Odyssey Jones without telling Xavier Woods, with Woods getting sucked into the Karrion Kross stuff, with the issues with the LWO, with the issues with R-Truth, with the issues with The Miz, with now the issues with Pete Dunne, it's like, we've got to handle our business, stop focusing on everything else. So at least within the story, within the confines of kayfabe, Xavier Woods' character is compelling and makes sense. The match is a very simple, hey, we're going to put two guys out there that we know can work. The challenge was this was following what was a very cold 6-woman tag for what was now essentially a C story on Raw. Mm-hmm. That audience really didn't have a chance to really get into this or respond.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to bring up. And yeah, I think they've laid a lot of great groundwork to build some layers to Xavier Woods and his kind of journey, for lack of a better phrase, to say to feud to this. And are you leaning more towards the side it's going to be a happy ending for New Day, or are you kind of like, are they kind of swaying you either way on a different aspect of that?
Yeah, I think that this has to end with them staying together. That was always their mission statement. It was, no matter what, we are always going to be a unit. We still have not seen Big E show up in any capacity. I think he'll be the voice of reason. We're having that 10th anniversary. There's two paths here, Dom. There's the path where we split these guys up and we tell a short-term story, or the path where they reunite at the 10th anniversary and they sell a ton of merchandise.
It's a good point. I just think for the long-term value of both those guys, it's almost beneficial to split them up.
The fingers mean the money.
It'll be interesting.
That is incredibly loud onto a microphone, by the way. In case you're wondering, for those of us listening in audio form or in video form and audio, that the page boy cap does not stifle the incredibly loud tone of whatever that noise was.
I have a stage voice. Somebody who else has a stage voice is Bronson Reed, as him and Seth Rollins continue to brawl. And this eventually leads to Adam Pearce making it official for next week. Bronson Reed will be taking on Seth Rollins, continuing this battle between one another. Are you for this? Do you like this, Robert?
Yeah, we know that it's a tape show. Obviously, they taped it last night, so you need to draw people to next week's Raw. They set up the Judgment Day match with Dominic Mysterio and Carlito taking on the War Raiders. We've now set up Bronson Reed versus Seth Rollins in a rematch. I know that there was a brief segment where they set up Sheamus and Braun Breaker. So
Yep.
you're giving the audience reasons to tune in next week. I kind of feel like next week's show is more stacked than this week's show ultimately was. But again, it was fine. There was nothing necessarily wrong with the decision. We've just seen it a number of times. This same iteration. One guy calls out the other guy, they wind up brawling, security guys get involved, you get a spectacle moment, and then Adam Pearce yelling, "You're never getting a match again," and then, okay, fine, you're getting a match again.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how they maneuver Bronson Reed moving forward too, because we're so used to him just brawling backstage constantly, all these big spots constantly, things like that. How are you going to evolve him a little bit and kind of hone in so it doesn't feel so repetitive? Is the question.
Well, this may be the point in which we can have that conversation then, Dom.
Hmm.
So very briefly, for the sake of not going through the entirety of Raw for argument's sake here, the only story on this show that was new, different, whatever, was who the fifth man was going to be. We saw
Yeah.
Sami Zayn and Jey Uso interact. The same as like, I think I got a guy. Jimmy goes and talks to Braun Breaker, which is compelling, but Sami approached Seth Rollins.
Right.
And Rollins had the natural response to someone who pays attention to this show. It's, are you kidding me? Do you not know what goes on with me and Roman? Do you not see what I did last year or this year? We're still in 2024. This year's never ending. Do you see what we're dealing with right now? This idea that you're going to put him back in power and I'm going to help you. You're insane. But then he confronts Solo Sikoa later on in the show. It feels like that fifth man spot could be Seth Rollins and Bronson Reed. I think that's one of three potential scenarios. I think if the three potential scenarios would be those guys going into there, Randy Orton and Kevin Owens going into there, or Cody and Kevin Owens going into there for that fifth man spot.
Yeah.
I would rather save Kevin and Cody or Kevin and Orton as a singles match at Survivor Series, which opens up the door for Rollins and Bronson Reed to be in War Games. And, there's an intrigue in Bronson Reed diving off the top of that cage.
Definitely an added element for that for sure. So, yeah, I thought that was a fun way to kind of navigate through Raw, was keeping that people popping in and out who is going to be the fifth man. I will give credit to Seth. I thought his backstage promo towards Sami was really, really good. I liked the conviction he kind of spoke with. So it's a different vibe than him like just constantly yelling and wanting, which we saw like moments beforehand. But I do have to tip the cap to my paperboy hat to him for that. So all right, we'll move, before we move on from Raw, did want to touch upon the Miz and Final Testament with the Wyatt Six. I like this nice little setup. Miz inadvertently bleeding from the eye somehow. But I thought the way they set all this up made Final Testament feel like a big deal and humanized, yet again, the Wyatt Six, which I like. I always like to have happen. So what do you think of that, Robert?
I thought the Final Testament was good. I think Wyatt Six felt significantly less special in this segment. I think there's just something about when you see them with the lights on, and they're just a bunch of guys, and they're a bunch of guys who were unfortunately somewhat unspectacular in prior iterations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how overly this feels like a lower card feud, which is fine, and you can get to a lower card Survivor Series style match with these guys if you chose to go that route. Same thing with the LWO and American Made.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's fair. I agree with you. I think the real big takeaway is they got to get rid of that Uncle Howdy wig. It's atrocious. So, not a fan of that. But hey, what we may be fans of is ROH, AEW headed
Well,
to the
there is one more thing before we do get to that, which was the main event.
Oh yes, David Priest and Louis Kaiser. We had that, and then we also had the women's tag match, obviously too, with Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill. So, and we got a lot of involvement going on there to close out the show. So, and the baby faces stood tall. What did you think of that, Robert?
feels like we're teeing up for a women's Survivor Series match. I don't know if they're going to do a women's War Game match. I think 2 War Games in one show can be a little lesser than, but it
Mhm.
definitely feels like there was a 4-on-4 situation there where you can add a 5th woman to either side. On the heel side, you can easily slide Candice LeRae into there since she's been sort of associated with that group. And on the babyface side, either Bailey or, depending on how healthy she is, maybe Rhea Ripley can be back in time for that.
Yeah, good point. Do you like this all setup of Survivor Series looking to appear to have all these Survivor Series matches yet again, plus the War Games?
I like Survivor Series matches. I always grew up liking them. I'm totally okay with these things happening. I used to love when they would pull random teams and they just give them a name.
I love that too.
That was super fun too. But
Yeah,
you know, I think that the War Games match is going to sell the show. Gunther and Priest is a good compliment. I think if you did that match, if you did a Kevin Owens Orton match or a Kevin Owens Cody match, if you have the time to even get to that story, and then one other Survivor Series match, it's a fine little card right there.
yeah. I think you're setting yourself up really well, harkening back to the olden days and with the modern talent. So I think that's always a plus. So yeah, pretty decent Raw, I would say. I thought it was a middle of the road, but above average, I would say at the same time too. So
There was
uh,
nothing wrong with it. There was nothing that you need to go out of your way for. It's fine. But it sounds like you're going to have to go out of your way from Pittsburgh up to New York to go to the Hammerstein Ballroom.
holy smokes, yes. ROH is set to take over the legendary Hammerstein Ballroom next month for a duo of exciting shows in the iconic venue. This week, it was reported that ROH Final Battle 2024 will take place from the Hammerstein Ballroom on December 20th. Andrew Zaharian reported that the December 21st edition of AEW Collision will also take place from the venue inside the Manhattan Center. Robert, we've talked about this plenty of times, how AEW should hone in on the smaller venues and the memory, harken back to some of that stuff, as well as playing to these historic venues. So good stuff for AEW and ROH here.
A lot of harkening coming from you, Dom.
Harkening. Harkening.
I think that's a great idea for them to run those venues. We've been saying, why have they not run the Manhattan Center before? Hammerstein Ballroom has history with Ring of Honor. Obviously, it has history with WWE. Manhattan Center, the former home of Monday Night Raw. Let's make that an interesting collision because of it. I think those are really smart decisions by AEW. Pick these interesting venues, these interesting locales, make it your own, make it feel different, make it a must-see show. We talked about the ratings for NXT and Dynamite last week. NXT won, and
Yeah.
17% of the Dynamite audience went over. Not because I think they were super excited to see NXT, because they wanted to see the ECW arena. They wanted to see you there, Dom.
That's it. They won. They wanted to look for me in the crowd and all that. But yeah, Robert, Hammerstein's such a neat atmosphere. Obviously, that we had one night stand there years back, but lots of memories there, and I think that's the good itch to scratch for AEW. And John Moxley's hoping for a little bit more when it comes to AEW. He had some very interesting comments with the New York Post about this new vibe he wants to have happen in AEW. So this is what he had to say, Robert. Everything that has happened up until this point doesn't matter. This is day zero. We begin from here. It might not look much different right now, but it will. And things are accomplished by small incremental steps, doing little things consistently. And that is how big changes are made over a period of time. And then he also added, talking about a backstage person, happened to make some comments he did not like very much. And this is what he said. This individual said, well, it's the bottom of the card. It doesn't matter. It's the bottom of the card. It doesn't matter. Can you imagine saying that? Like, you're effing fired. Yeah, you're effing fired. Go work at Sunglass Hut. You should be effing pistol whipped for saying that. Everybody's on the top was at one time on the bottom. That's how it works. You climb the ladder. You see a lot of frustration and confusion from some of these talents because there is no effing ladder. They don't know what to do. They're kind of just wandering in the desert. We're going to grab them by the shoulder and we're going to walk them. What do you think of these comments? It kind of creates that added intrigue for what you want with this Moxley faction and hopefully an actual direction of AEW, because that is kind of what has been interpreted throughout the course of this past couple of years with AEW is no direction.
Yeah, I don't know how thrilled I am from Tony Khan, who's saying everything up to this point doesn't matter. I don't know if this interview was done totally in kayfabe or not, But the message is absolutely clear. There needs to be a singular focus within that company. There needs to be a motivation. There needs to be a hunger. There is not a hunger within that company. There seems to be a lot of people who go there, they put in their time once a week, and then they're done. And you need to be fighting for your spot. The folks on Raw, folks on SmackDown, the 2-hour window of time are doing everything they can to get that sort of TV exposure. AEW is that much more haphazard. There is no rhyme or reason. One week you're the main event, next week you're the third match on the card, then you're off TV for 6 weeks.
Right.
There's no incentive. There's also no financial incentive associated with that. They seem to have more solid guarantees in terms of their contract, so they don't seem to necessarily be losing any sleep over attendance or pay-per-view buy rates or the like. They're certainly not getting merch money, and they're not out there running house shows. So if I'm just told, hey, I got to show up 1 day a week to work, maybe 2 days a week, and if I'm used, I'm used. If I'm not, I'm not. I may have a storyline. I might not have a storyline. It's very hard for them to really feel invested in what's going on there, other than, boy, I hope there's still a company for me to work for.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we were hoping for the best here, and I think there's been a little bit more depth when it comes to the storytelling aspect of the show overall. But there's still a lot of holes, and there's still a lot of questions that remain unanswered that need to be answered, I think, if you want to elevate the product a little bit more. And so hopefully Moxley's comments echo a little bit throughout those arenas, then including the Hammerstein Ballroom. So, yes, I think it's something that needed to be said almost. Even if
I think they have a very large roster that's probably in some degrees too big. You can't really focus on all those people, and you don't seem to care about focusing on all those people. I think that you could easily whittle that down significantly and have a really great crew to build off of.
Yeah, I agree, Robert. Well, I mean, yeah, so we'll see. We'll definitely be previewing Dynamite tomorrow and have hopefully some good stuff to talk about when it comes to what happens on there.
Well, I know they've announced the card, so what we'll be able to do tomorrow, we'll be able to talk a little reflective on NXT, a little forward-looking on AEW Dynamite. But for those of you who are clamoring for more audio content from your hosts, I just recorded a Something to Sports Entertainment with this morning, which is up on the Patreon for Working Stiff. I also recorded one yesterday with Scott Chaplin. That was a hell of a lot of fun. Both of those should be up within the Patreon world or on your main feed. You can go check out Friday's episode of Working Stiff. It's still evergreen. It's still enjoyable. It's still worth a listen. And speaking of green, Mr. Rob Van Dam has got a show this week, but you did a special fill-in episode yesterday.
Yes, I did. Thankfully enough, right before I left for Philly, I conducted an interview with Bret the Hitman Hart. Boom, right here. We discussed Leo Burke and his his legacy that left on the wrestling business. He passed away this past summer, and Bret went in depth on the career of Leo Burke and who he influenced, from names like Adam Copeland to Christian to Mark Henry to Ken Shamrock to obviously himself too. So really great stories, some funny stories, some good ribs and stuff like that. So tune into that. It's long form. It's an hour and a half. So I was fortunate enough to speak with Bret for that long. It's up on the RVD podcast feed, One of a Kind with RVD, or you can tune into it at OneTrueSportTV.com. So different ways to listen to it. Check it out. There's also an article up on SEScoops.com too as well. So be sure to look for that. And hey, later today, meet Magnum TA, Greg Gagne. We're recording live 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 4HorsemenNetwork.com. So be sure to join us live, ask some questions. We'll have plenty to talk about, including Moxley's comments. I'm going to bring that up and get both their perspectives on that. So, yes, so take a look at that. What a show, Robert. Man, I'm excited for tomorrow, too.
Sounds like a blast, and it's always a blast here on Rumor and Innuendo, which you can catch live every Monday through Friday at noon Eastern on a plethora of platforms, including the WWE Creative _ISH X account, the SE Scoops X account, and on YouTube on Working Stiff, ad-free shows, and Rumor and Innuendo. So on behalf of the Dark Knight himself, Dominic D'Angelo, I'm Robert Karpelis. Best of luck in your future endeavors.
I'm an agent of chaos.